Alright, 7.2 derivatives inverse functions. I'm just going to do one problem as an example here because this is really just about knowing this formula and just kind of show you how this formula works. So if they ask for the derivative of the inverse function, this is the formula you're looking for. Okay, and here it says if f of x equals x cubed plus e to the x, and they actually give us an inverse value. We wouldn't really be able to do this without a calculator if they didn't give this to us, but they give us the inverse value. Find the derivative of the inverse function when x equals 1. So let's just start with the formula so we can see how this means. Really, they want the derivative of the inverse, so we're just going to use this function. This just means derivative of the inverse, and this equals 1 over the derivative of f, but we first need to know the inverse value to plug into the derivative. Well, I know this is all kind of confusing, but look, they actually tell us that they want it at 1, right? So at x equals 1. So we're really just saying, okay, we want to know 1 over f prime of f negative 1 of 1. Well, we already know this value. They gave it to us. They said the inverse of f at 1 is 0. So this is really just saying 1 over f prime of 0. So now we have f of x. We need f prime. We need the derivative of f. So let's do that elsewhere. Here I'm going to go ahead and just use that. The derivative of f would be 3x squared plus e to the x. And we don't just need the derivative, we need the derivative at 0, so let's go ahead and plug that in. Well, this is pretty easy actually, because 0 squared is 0 times 3 is just 0, so this whole thing is just 0. And anything to the 0 power is just 1, so really what we have here is 0 plus 1. Well, that's just 1. So, going back up to our original problem, we could plug in a 1, we get 1 over 1. This whole thing is just 1. Now, it probably won't always be that pretty, but the math is pretty standard. You're going to first find your inverse value, and then you're going to find your derivative, and then plug in that value. Now, real quick, in case you're not familiar with what an inverse is, like I said, this one's going to be a little bit tricky to find, but an inverse is like this. Let's just do a little review over here real quick. Let's say you had something like f of x equals x squared. Well, to find the inverse, you're finding like the opposite function. These two functions should undo each other in a way. So what we do is we temporarily replace the f of x with y. Then you switch your x and your y. And then you solve for the new y. So if you solve for the new y, you take the square root of both of these, you would have that y equals plus or minus square root of x. And then you would replace the y now with f negative 1 of x, because this is now the inverse function. There you go. And you can't really have a plus or minus in your function because that's going to count for two values. So this really has two inverse functions, a positive and a negative. So that's what an inverse is. Okay, so you might have to go back and find the inverse, but usually in these types of problems they're going to give you the inverse value like they did here, and you're just plugging it all into the formula. All right, see you guys on the next video.